Hey tribe, it's Ritah the Thought and welcome to Talk Thoughts. I hope you guys enjoy the conversation. Follow Ritah the Thought on Instagram to keep updated. Hi Mike, hi everybody. Hi Rachel, thank you for joining our live for today. I'm sure she's just connecting into the live session. There we go. Hi Miss Rachel.
Hello, how are you doing?
How are you? You look beautiful.
So do you, and you have so much color. I tried my level best to go somewhere that had action, but the lighting much better.
No, that's fine.
So
That's fine.
embarrassed, but this is really good because you provide the content and we are going to learn. That is what Africa is about. They provide us the content. So we're late.
Thank you so
Right?
much for having this conversation, Mama.
I feel so honored, and for thought leaders like you that are really thinking about this during this time, that just goes to show who you are as a leader and how much we, as members of the African diaspora, away from the continent, have to connect more so. Thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you so much for that, Miss Rachel. On that, actually, I wanted to ask if you identify as an African American, as an African.
You know what? I have been through a range of an identity here. I do identify as African American, Black American, but in most of my bios or representations of myself, I do make a distinction between being Haitian American. So
Right.
it is, yeah, it's unique, which actually that whole process, that whole journey got me to leaving everything behind and living on in South Africa for this past year. Just that whole journey of
Yes.
really understanding identity and how we're all connected.
All right. That is interesting because yesterday we had a conversation with another lady called Jessica. And Jessica Dandridge, and she was talking about how we were talking about how we don't know each other. We don't know our backgrounds. African Americans or Black Americans don't know Africans and Africa, and so it's difficult to get into their narrative. And then
Yeah.
Africans only have so much of a picture of Americans and all that. And so I'm interested to know how that journey was like for you in South Africa before we get into the questions. What have you learned? Are you interested in the language? Are you interested in the culture? Did you feel a connection? Even spiritually, how did that go for you?
Thank you for asking that question. That was, it's been a journey and something that I'm still processing now. First of all, I had the pleasure of visiting South Africa before I moved. So we visited Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Town. I ended up living in South Africa. And when I tell you that the danger of the single narrative that people have of the
Mm-hmm.
continent, when I got there, my journey there was a learning. Let me tell you, Rita, I had to be quiet because there's a propensity, even sometimes when we come from abroad, to download and process, even
Mm-hmm.
in our Americanism, in our Black Americanism,
Mm-hmm.
and what we don't know. And really, what I learned, and I wasn't just in South Africa, I went to visited Zimbabwe, I visited
Oh,
Zambia.
you did.
I
You
did.
came
Yes.
to
I was in
Zimbabwe.
I was in Mbisi, Zimbabwe.
What?
I
Wow.
and yeah, I was connected with a church that was there, and then
Right.
I went to Zambia. And when I tell you that uh, it's so rich, complex, uh, so strong. Learning history that I didn't know. There's so much
Mm.
things I didn't know until I came to the continent. You hear about it as the more educated you become,
Mm-hmm.
the more you start to seek out additional information.
Yeah.
And as a I knew that there's so much more to a people and so much more to a culture than media images
Yeah.
and the information that we get or lack of information
Yeah.
that we get. So I appreciated my experience in South Africa. In Southern Africa, I say, it changed me, it molded me, it made me more curious. I sought out conversation with
Mm-hmm.
everyday people, and sort of that common narrative that we come with from the Western world
Mm-hmm.
needs to be ruthlessly dismantled.
Mm-hmm.
Ruthlessly dismantled. It's the continent is so rich and the countries are so diverse and the people are as diverse as we are in
Mm-hmm.
the diaspora. And so spiritually, I am a Christian, but spiritually it was an awakening for me. It was enriching. And I trace back my ancestry to Haiti, but really the start of that ancestry is in slavery. So I had to keep going. I had to keep going. And it
Mm-hmm.
brought me to Africa. It brought me back to the continent. Our descendants are West Africans, so I still have more journey to do on the continent. But just being in South Africa was very enlightening, enriching, and part of the work that I'm currently doing is helping to expose and dismantle the idea that even the tourists, you don't, maybe Africa is not a place that you want, continent that you want to do or tourism in. And that's absolutely false. It is beautiful, and I had
Mm-hmm.
an amazing time.
Oh, that is amazing. That is amazing. I'm glad you came here. You didn't have trouble with language and
Well,
understanding
you
everything and
lucky
the
for
food.
lucky for yeah, English was spoken.
Everyone was literate.
I would have known. Most people speak English, right? Especially in Southern Africa, there lots of people speak English. I did go to a church where they spoke in Zulu, and so I sat in spaces. They translated in English, but
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to force myself to sit and try to process the way they speak and preach and sing,
Mm-hmm.
and just the cadence in which they do it. And at times I wish, gosh, I really wish I understood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I really embarrassed to say I got Johnny and a few other words, and that's basically it. So I'm going to work a little bit more. But I found that just the diverse of languages that can exist in one country is amazing. The dialects, the variety is amazing. That just goes to reaffirm the fact that we are so diverse. We're not monolithic, and that is something that is critical in passing that down to the next generations of people in the diaspora.
Yes. All right. So, having said that, then I guess we can answer the question that is on our topic that highlights how or what the school systems in America and the European schools as well, from preschool to college, teach to our children, or teach children rather, period, about Africa and the continent, our history and all that.
Um, okay, I would say two things. Unfortunately, in our school systems, it's more of a footnote. And the imagery is not one that is fairly representative of all that the continent is. You
Mm,
know, over about 54 countries, if I'm not mistaken, that makes up this entire continent.
mm,
And you have basically one, maybe five images that has been represented in history, in our writings, in what we see on television.
mm,
So particularly in the school system, African Americans struggle with getting a full scope of their history into our American history curriculum, right? We have a month, which broadens our perspective a lot of times, but
mm,
because teachers are in a lot of places, the constraints that are placed on education to
mm,
get content out and lesson planning out and pass state board testing really African American history becomes a moot point. We learn about Martin Luther King and a few of our heroes. It is not even comprehensive on our own lands. So
Right.
never mind trying to go further back. If I think about some of the African history that I did capture in my education, if you will, in my education, I would have to say it was a combination of movies, television, so not
Media.
so much media, right? So
Mm.
media is perpetuating our history and what we know, movies. Biblical history gives you a hint, okay?
Mm.
If you are educated, if biblical history gives you a hint that, okay, there was so much more because we have stories of Egypt and Ethiopia in the
Mm.
Bible, but that is also limited because we know the historians of that and how that was passed around in and around the world.
Mm.
So really, if I'm being honest, there is not much um, information being shared in our history books at all
Mm.
about it. Act to the all, especially when I was able to see with my eyes, Rita, myself, how comprehensive, how dynamic, how rich in content, culture, language, perspective, intellectualism that
Mm.
existed. No, it's not there at all. Show me
Mm.
a book. I don't care where you see it. It's going to be images of poverty, war torn,
Mm.
barbaric ideologies, and
Mm.
we have to dismantle that.
Mm.
Because if we don't dismantle that, what happens is it's a dehumanizing. And you
Mm.
see that your ancestors, your direct ancestors in the diaspora, your brothers and sisters in the diaspora are dehumanized because their story starts off from this imaging that we had European settlers come and these barbaric, uncivilized, selling them own people into slavery. That's the single narrative. It came, they were tribal, they had no systems and ways and rules, they had no history. And we know that's a lie. We had oral tradition that dates back
Mm.
centuries, probably before European history, right? So we have to really think about how we really have to get to the crux and core of bringing in African history as an appreciated and important part of American history, of U.S. history, and of world history. I
Mm.
found more knowing so much more about U.S. history and really white U.S. history more than they even know about our history, right? But
Mm.
you guys know more about America. You guys know more about Western
Yes.
culture than we know about your culture. That's a problem. That's a
Yeah.
single narrative, and that's what we talk about. That's what we mean when we talk about systematic racism. It's
Mm.
it's a system that continues in our education
Mm.
where images and thought processes and ideologies about who we are
Mm.
need to be dismantled.
Mm. That is very interesting because that we had like I said, we've been having conversations on this, and one of the topics that actually keeps coming up is the issue of tribe, about understanding the different tribes and the different places, and like you're saying, the substance that is in
Yeah,
Africa, contrary to what you guys that are down in the USA actually know about us, which is
correct.
very. Yes, we know a lot. We know a lot about European history. We know a lot about American history. It's in our books. We are taught about it in school and also through media. And it surprised. Well, I knew it. Like in the back of my head, I knew it that okay, yeah. So these guys probably don't know. They probably don't necessarily have material, like tangible, good material that they learn about Africa, and hence these mindsets. because my biggest question was, should we be connected? We should be connected one way or the other, but should we be involved in each other's lives? Should the Africans be involved in the lives of the Black Americans, Black Europeans, African Europeans, whatever, and vice versa? And so education for me became a very important question. What are these guys being taught? Because if you're taught, then you get curious and you possibly start on a journey to identify yourself, to create, to get an identity of yourself. And that leads me to my next, to the next question. Um, how has that affected identity when it comes to the African American, when it comes to Black Americans, when it comes to Black Europeans? Uh, how do they identify themselves? I think I asked you personally how you identify as yourself, but how is that for Black Americans? How is that for the communities down there?
I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to take my Haitian cultural perspective away. I'm going to bring it back in a minute.
All right.
As a Black American, I would say that there is no respite when you don't understand your history. All right. When we don't understand that we come from a long line of greatness and there's royalty in your lineage, and there is so much more than the images that are being portrayed, right? When you don't see images of yourself celebrated, when you don't understand how we even got here. So here, let me paint a picture for you.
Right.
If you your ancestors, if the story is your ancestors were sold by your fellow ancestors, so you weren't wanted anyway, then you crossed into over the seas into slavery, right? And you were less than in history. We were taught that we were what? Less than human. It's written into our history and written into our policies. You can't be anything, you can't do anything. So even when you go home into the confines of your own home, there's no counter image, and mothers and parents have to do a lot of work to pour in, re-identify. But the pouring in, when your cup is empty and you don't know where else to flow from, right?
Yeah.
So then you pour into a child or whatnot, but you don't even have all of the information, all of the content, all of the language, all of the perspective, all of the power, even the stories, even books and stories and information that you can point to. Eventually your cup runs dry and you keep regurgitating the same thing. And we need to go deeper. Our roots run deep. Our roots run deep. And we need to continue to explore those deep roots. And thankfully, there has been a generation of people who are starting to say no to a single narrative, want to know their DNA. What country can I trace from? Thanks to technology and social media and meeting different people and travel, we're able to start to ask more questions. But that's not the mass experience. It's not enough. We need to make sure that the next generation hears the story. So it can't stop with me. One of the reasons why I labeled myself a global educator is because I was an educator prior to the work I was doing in Haiti and prior to going to South Africa. And so in my mind, I realized, Rachel, you have to remind yourself that this information, this learning, this expansion, this respect that you have for the continent, for the people, for Haiti, it needs to be taught down. It needs to be taught and expanded. And there's a work that we need to do. We need to tie our history, Black history, directly back to the continent. And we need the continent to pump us with materials. We need people like you to keep fighting to get diverse voices, perspectives, even the history of our countries to be explained. Or if tribalism was explained as just merely just minor, micro kind of countries, really, even though we're on the same thing, we have different beliefs, languages,
Mm,
systems, right? So if you understand it like that, it is not, oh, we just sold ourselves, into, it was a system of war, right? And so one
mm,
of the things that really helps to kind of understand where we go from there,
right.
And so I think the more we expose, the more our curiosity is piqued.
Mm,
The more curiosity is piqued, the more we start asking questions.
mm-hmm,
The more we start asking questions, you get upset or channel that into passion. And the more passionate you get, you have to tie it directly back. You got to circle it back to education.
mm-hmm,
Many of us, very many colleagues that are in the fight for education. Black people need to be represented in education. We need to stay in education. We need to diversify ourselves. We need to expand our knowledge because we need to continue to pass down deeper and expansive knowledge from where we came from the mother continent. We are African American, and really that just the scope or the boundaries of that knowledge is
mm,
literally we came from Africa. We were stolen from Africa and we came to America. But what happened before you were stolen? What
mm,
happened before? What were the countries? What were the languages? Who are the people? What were their accomplishments? What
mm,
did they do? Who are they now? Who are your
mm.
ancestors now? You
Yeah.
know? So those kind of things are very, very important. I become very passionate about it, and I have very many colleagues. I think I have a couple of colleagues that came on that are also passionate about sharing our stories, our shared stories.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I guess you touched on a point that I was going to ask. Mike Dube just asked if it doesn't come down to interest, and we touched a little bit on that. But how interested are or African Americans actually. We can speak about, yes, we need to know and trace back our roots and everything, etc. But how interested are Black people or African Americans in actually knowing about where they come from, about knowing their history, or are they content with what is right now? And then there's the few people like you, like Jessica Dandridge, like Lakidra, who are interested in actually knowing where they came from and have made the effort to come down to Africa. So how much interested? Because we can come up with programs, we can come up with we can devise little plans as to how people can get so much information or can be educated on African history. But then, how interested are African Americans or Black people rather in getting that information?
That's a complex question, because I touched on it a little bit. Interest um, doesn't come out of nowhere, right? Interest is fed. What we become interested in is through our exposure.
Mm,
Um, Let me give you a story. There are a lot of, I'm Haitian, and because of the very many um, the pain points in our history, in our relationship with the world, with our fellow islanders. Many times when you come to the United States, you become disinterested
mm,
in your history, right? You say, I never want to go back to that, whatever that was. And sometimes when we're not exposed
mm,
and educated to history, it's hard to become interested. All
right.
right. When you think that most of Africa is stereotypical, demeaning, poor,
Mm-hmm.
it is hard to be interested.
Right.
There is something that is shifting, right? The more and more we as a people get educated, the broader our interests become. I remember younger, who wants to go to the continent of Africa? Who wants to visit, right? If there was no interjection, if there was no interjection to what Africa is, or a reintroduction, why would you ever want to visit? Most people who discover visiting are people who start to travel, maybe people who are in diverse communities. That's the importance of diversity. So when you ask that question, how interested, I think you're asking us a deeper question. You're asking us, what has blocked our interest? What has blocked our interest? And so that should be the question. I know that it is easier to say, oh, they don't seem to be interested, you know, when you're in the land of opportunity, right? When you're in the land of opportunity,
Make America
right?
great again.
Hey, listen. What you mean? I'm not trying to go over there to a war-torn country, to poverty that abounds. I was in a conversation before I moved with somebody I respected before I transitioned my job, and I told them that I was moving, and they was like, why there? I couldn't even, and I visited before, so I was just like, what do you mean why there? Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Why not? Why not? And for me, my experience have made it resolute that I either want to retire on the continent, I want to live there permanently. That is what I want to do. I want to be able to explore. There's so much I don't know, and the more I became exposed, let me tell you something. The more ignorant I became. So then, the more silent I became. Then, when you go back, those who are exposed go back, and we say, I don't even know how to articulate, dismantle, begin to suggest that there's so much more. Because then you say, what is blocking people's interest? And as an educator, you get real quick. Things start blocking. There's a whole bunch of blocking that starts to happen. You say, okay, what do we need to prioritize? We don't have time to prioritize this because so much stuff is going on in our community. We need to focus on this. We need to focus on that. We need to focus on this. And we have so much urgent crisis issues that we have to deal with in the diaspora that's the block. That's the block. That's the. I'm really dramatic. I'm really sorry. I've had to just go ahead.
No, it's fine.
My face. I get it from my people. We're just really. Okay.
It's all good. We get it.
I've adopted that. We have to really think about, and somebody mentioned media image and the poisoning of that. I'm reading as we're going along.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have to start to demand. And there's a movement going on now. We have to demand positive image, positive storytelling. Even, let me think about it as a child. Think about it as a child. As a child, let me ask you this question. What do you think is the number one place that a 5-year-old, between 5 and 10-year-old want to go in the world? Let me see if you know this, Ritah. If not, I'm going to ask the people who are watching, the number one place that if you're 5, between the ages of maybe even 4 to 10, where in the world do you want to go as a child? What do you think, Ritah?
That is hard. From an African perspective, that is so hard.
Let me help you. It's a place in the United States.
Disneyland?
It's a Disneyland.
Like I started thinking, I think in my mind I was like, okay, fine. From an African perspective, not a lot of kids want to go to Disneyland, but then that side, that side, I guess everybody wants to go to Disneyland.
If a whole generation, every generation after generation after generation want to go to Disneyland, you got to ask yourself the power of a story, even in the imagination, even in how we imagine things. So you have every kid say, "Mommy, I want to go to Disney World." You can tell your child. I don't have children yet, but I'm an educator. I have thousands of nieces and nephews, at least 15 plus and counting. Imagine if a child, you could tell a child, no, let's go here. They're going to say, no, I want to go to Disneyland. You say, what about here? What about the Smith? They know, no, they want to go to Disneyland. It's even in our storytelling and the depiction and our dreaming and our books. All of those things are important. So what blocks interest to Africa and African history? We don't have enough stories. We don't have enough Wakanda Forever. We don't have enough dreaming. We don't have enough characters. It all goes back to our education. It is critical that even in the way we tell stories, and there is no place on, someone said as an adult Las Vegas, exactly. So if you are Black and from the Western world, you're thinking, let's go to here and there and everywhere, but Africa is not on some people's minds, on many people's minds. You think of so many different places. What else do you think of? If I'm going to ask you another question, I'm going to poll people who are watching, maybe if from the Western world, if you had to get on the plane, if you only had one shot, and this is one shot, you had to get on the plane, what continent will you be going to and where? Now, for me, I know I'll be going to Africa. But if you had one shot, Ritah, I want you to answer that question from your perspective. But I also want people from the Western world, my American brothers and sisters, tell us where, if you had one shot at airplane ticket.
I'd go to the Caribbean.
Okay, see, you'll go to the Caribbean. Some of us will go to the Caribbean if you have Caribbean. But I'm going to tell you that there are places where we are indoctrinated to even want to visit before we even know. And I don't see anyone saying, but let me tell you, the number one place as a child that I kind of daydreamed about.
It's where?
Was Paris.
Oh, the love.
Okay, so if you're from the continent, you might want to go to America. Paris, the city of love. Right? The first place we want to go to. The first place. When I came to start traveling just a little bit on the continent, I said there are so many. When I went to Victoria Falls, I had 0 point. I've never been to the Eiffel Tower yet. It's last on my list because there's 50 plus countries on that continent that I want to see. I want to see the pyramids, and I want to see Victoria Falls, and I want to see so many different places that I've never heard of, right? Now, if I get to Europe and go to Paris, I'll be excited about that. I'll take a picture. I'll see the Eiffel Tower, whatever the scenario may be. But it has become last on my list because I've been exposed to all of the amazing beaches and beauty. My best friend's on, she talks about the beaches in Africa. Yes, there is so much beauty that is untapped, untalked about, not expressed, not understood. I want to tell a quick story about Jamaica being the number one destination in the Caribbean islands. That didn't come by happenstance. For a very long time, Jamaica was still under the British rule, all the way up until, I don't know, but till fairly recently, very short and recent. So the tourism industry is expensive there, might I add, not owned by the locals, right? And so that's the idea of Jamaica is still something that was perpetuated in media to help us want to go there. And unfortunately, many people go there and don't interface and get a real sense of the culture. They go to the beach, they have a good time, they go to the resort. See, for you, you want to go to the Caribbean island because you've seen the waters and the
and the trees and the sun
and the mangoes. And that's important too. That's important too, because at least if we could get you there, maybe there could be some raindrops that fall on you to make you say, well, I want to find out more about the people. I want to find out more about the culture. I want to find out more about, but it's very important that even in our imaginations, that the images are there, even in our history. So it has me thinking. I don't have the answer, but it has me thinking about how much propaganda was
Mm-hmm.
in place to continue to view ourselves
Mm-hmm.
less than human.
Wow.
And
On
when
that,
that hope,
on that,
uh,
on that, I'm
yeah,
actually curious. There's a question. I think it actually goes well with the question that Doris Mufara asked earlier on because I was thinking about the propaganda. I was like, okay, fine. The media and everything. What is the misconception that African Americans or Black people in the American Europe actually have concerning Africa and Africans? I know we spoke about poverty. I know we spoke about war, and the general stuff. But what else? What else do? What is it that Africans, when an African person, besides Wakanda Forever? I mean, I was going to touch on that. Besides Wakanda Forever, what are the misconceptions? I mean, we don't live in jungles. We live in houses. We have electricity. We have
but
water. We have
they
Wi-Fi as well,
we
and
don't
all
know
that.
available anywhere. Let me ask the course. Someone asked a question. Where are you from, Rita? That's
Yes,
important for other people that are on here that don't know about you. So where are you from?
I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm in Harare, Zimri Park in Zimbabwe.
All right.
Thank you.
So let me just say this. I There was going to be no electricity,
Mm.
uh, huts. Everybody don't have clothes.
Mm.
Um, so it stems from poverty, right?
Mm.
All the images related to that.
Yeah.
Aggressive,
Mm.
aggressive,
Aggressive.
ignorant,
Woo.
aggressive, ignorant.
Sorry,
Um,
just to cut you off there. Aggressive
aggressive.
equals to how you guys are actually treated.
Hmm. It does.
They
It's
see
all
us as
connected.
aggressive people. They see you as aggressive people by the color that is equated to us, and they then counter and treat you with aggression.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That is,
It's
yeah,
all
that is
tied.
crazy. That is
It's
crazy.
all tied. It's all tied. So when you see stories, just stories about people going through woods and robbing girls, and they are, just have darkness and demonic. It has been
Mm.
some attached to the continent,
Mm.
demonic,
Mm.
lacking light,
Yeah.
darkness, because there's a misunderstanding of who we are. So when you think of that, you think of people that have to be trained,
Mm.
people that has to be subdued,
Mm.
they are released,
Mm.
they have to be killed or captured. So you see all of that, and that traces in our history as slaves. They had to be killed, caught, captured. They're just trying to get to freedom. They were
Animals.
seen as property that had to be killed, caught, captured. They're dangerous. This, that, and the other. And then
Like you're
now when we
hunting a lion, like you're hunting a dragon or something, like an animal. Like
like hunting an animal. And so, and also when you only see, maybe you see positive images only when it relates to, and even it's not always possible, only when it relates to taming wild animals, so they're the ones that tame the wild animals.
mm,
Because we have some kind of instinctive, and when I was there, I was like, no, these animals are walking the earth with these people. It was just so enlightening.
yeah,
And the question that's heavy on my shoulders in my lap is, how do we continue to educate? I have
yeah,
a colleague, his name is Sherman Hughes, and his whole passion is about developing global citizens.
yes,
and that idea of expansion. I came from a charter school, which I will say that whole idea of international travel and exposing people to different parts of the world is very critical into changing the narrative, the damaging narrative that we have. And so it's so much, Rita. It's so much. And I don't have the answers. Please let me be clear that, but we co-create the
Yeah.
answers. So for me, I have an initiative to help people dream of Africa, to travel Africa.
Yeah.
Travel, okay, to
Which,
experience, step outside of your comfort zone
yeah.
and not expect, and don't expect a Western experience.
Yeah.
Why would you come somewhere that is not Western and expect and want and demand a Western experience? That
Experience.
is systematically racist as well. We need to dismantle that. It
Yeah.
is okay to embrace and learn and accept and understand and not, oh, it's dangerous and it's scary
Mm.
and crime. There's crime everywhere.
Yeah.
There's crime. And so it's so scary to visit other
Mm.
places on. That's kind of the overarching idea that we have.
Mm.
Fortunately, many have, but many don't. We are making a turn. I want people to be clear that there is a turn that is being made. We are demanding a better understanding of who we are, and we're seeking that out
Mm.
for our. We're
That is
seeking that
good.
out.
All right. So I'm just gonna go through our comments before we get on to the last question. Um, Hip Hop Offsprings, that's Mike Briggs. He just said that the question that we spoke about interest is painfully complicated and layered that in and of itself is an entire panel discussion. So I guess we're gonna have a discussion on that one pretty soon. Everybody will have to latch on to the next talk. And then Mike Dubé says, personally, I think maybe the school curriculum that ends on Africa from the slave point of view then ends there is a problem. I feel like that is a problem as well. Like, even if you look at
Yeah.
our history, it's in Zimbabwe, where we speak about Chimurenga, the wars that happened in Zimbabwe, the Chimurenga, and then after that, the productivity. Maybe because we're here, it's easier to then know because you continue digging deep into what's going on in your society. But when you look at other in the history context, in the history textbooks that are learned in school, it's the wars, slavery, and that's it, and that's that. After
Yeah.
that, there's nothing else. Then somebody also says our collapse in the educational system and our pornographic and perverse poisoned media outlets have contributed to the lack of interest and even the resistance to learn our own African history.
Correct.
It is so funny. We were having this conversation with my mom. That's Doris Mufarade in the panel, in the comment section. We spoke about that, about how the media has painted a picture for the black. It was speaking in terms of women, the black woman, and we're talking about housewives, uh, uh, housewives
Atlanta.
of Atlanta, housewives of Atlanta, and it's just fighting and backbiting, and I got this, I got that, it's just like competition and all that, and I'm like, okay, fine, you women have businesses, or you're trying to
Correct.
come up with businesses.
Correct.
Why don't you focus on that and teach each other how to actually come up with other, bigger projects, or even collaborate instead of trying to bash somebody at their own business launch or something like that. So that is very interesting. And then he also says, consider the not so distant past of the Africans in America and the punishment of brutality that are associated with embracing, exemplifying any portion of your African heritage. And I think we
Yeah.
touched on that, right?
Yes.
When we said people are identifying as Africans, and now there's an awakening, and people are like, no, this is who we are, and you're getting
Right.
backlash from that. And then when you speak about Black Lives Matter, you have everybody saying, no, all lives matter,
All
white lives matter too, blah blah blah.
it's problematic when all lives matter. And it's hard. When it's hard for you to say Black Lives Matter, there's a problem with that. Because why is it hard for you to say that? Let me tell you why.
Mm,
If we were in Germany and after the Holocaust, and if technology and social media were there,
mm,
they said Jewish lives matter,
mm,
we would be able to understand that without saying, no, all lives matter. That's not the point.
mm-hmm.
So when there is a resistance to saying Black Lives Matter, we got to ask ourselves, what is, and even, let me tell you something, and I'm going to be fair, I'm going to be honest with you. There was a resistance when the first Black Lives Matter movement was out. There was even a resistance among Black people to say Black Lives Matter because we don't want to be perceived that we hate other people, but that's not the point. The point, the question we have to ask ourselves is, why is it so hard to say, you know what, Black Lives Matter? Because us mattering less is entrenched in the DNA of not just American history,
Mm,
European history,
mm.
not just European history, global history.
History.
And
Mm,
sometimes we have swallowed that even in ourselves.
mm,
You know what? We matter. Our pain matters less
mm-hmm,
because we're so strong.
mm,
Our tears matter less because we're super women. We internalize that and we embrace those damaging issues as well. And
mm,
we do things like, well, if he just didn't run, then he wouldn't have gotten shot.
mm,
Or we say, some people say, well, what did he do to put himself in that situation?
mm,
A fatal situation? And so a lot of people want to ask us because our lives matter less. And
mm,
so it's important that we continue to say Black Lives Matter. We continue to help people articulate that because in the DNA, the systematic racism, in the identity that we even adopt, even when we assimilate, you know what it means to assimilate? You know what it means to say you can't wear your hair natural, you got to straighten it. It
mm.
says you matter less. When you have to use skin bleaching creams because you want to be lighter, that means your darkness matters less. When you think that you have to work 10 times, 15 times, 20, 30 times harder to be recognized, appreciated for your expertise, when you have to work so hard and we adopt that, we got to work 10 times harder, 20 times harder.
Mm,
That means we matter less.
yeah.
All right. When our history tells us we started as slavery and we keep saying that over and over and over again, that says that, you know what? We matter less. And that history, that knowledge, this is what we will say. We make concessions. We say, well, maybe it was a good thing. I mean, look, if it wasn't for slavery, we wouldn't even be here in the Americas and get to experience the land of opportunity. And, you know, maybe in the long grand scheme of things, it was part of the plan and it's a good thing. And, you know, and so, you know, no, you say some good came out of it. That's what we say. Well, some good came out of it. That means that we mattered less. And so we have to continue to say Black Lives Matter. That's important for us to say that.
That is very interesting. So in my heart of hearts, um, connecting with the question from the previous talk, where we said, do we have a role, like I said, in each other's lives as Africans
Yeah.
and Black Americans and African Americans? I think that
Yes.
it's important now, speaking especially in the issue of education. This shows that already we are conditioning you conditioning your kids to think Black Lives Matter. It's now an agenda and all that, and now they need to learn about their African history. They need to learn why then you are saying Black Lives Matter. So the system, so now it's on you now. It's on you now to teach your children, to teach our children real, true
Yes.
African history. It's an honest that is on you now. It's an honest that is on us. Unfortunately, now we live in a global world, and everything that happens in the Americas trickles down and it affects us in Africa. Stuff that
Yes.
happens wherever it trickles down. It's an exchange. We're
Yes.
talking over a phone, over IG Live right now, and it's the global community,
Yes.
and we're speaking one language. And so the education now, I think we need to come up with a solution. And like you were saying, you spoke about global citizens, global citizenship. We were just saying the other day that maybe we need to have a pen pal system now. Reintroduce the old pen pal system. And if an African American or you're Black European or whatever, or whoever who's not in Africa but feels they need to identify with the African, maybe having a pen pal or a friend or a sister or whatever from the continent will help you get educated in the African history, because it's like you said, it's systematic. So the whole system has to go through an upheaval for you to include real and true African history.
Yes.
Before all of that, because it's a fight, clearly it's a fight. It's
It
always
is.
going to be a fight about these Black people and Africa and where they come from and stuff. It's always going to be a fight. No problem. Let's not fight. Let's come up with a solution. Let's teach ourselves. Let's teach our
Yes.
children so that our children's children don't have to go through the things that we're all going through right now.
And Rita, let me tell you this. I beg you guys. This is one of the reasons why I I acknowledge my Haitian heritage. I beg you guys not to replace the beauty that is uh, Africa with the ideology that you dream of wanting to come here to the land of opportunity. It's okay. We all, if it, my parents wanted a better life for me as well, but we have a responsibility also to tell multiple narratives,
Mm.
multiple narratives,
Multiple
to
true narratives.
multiple truths, parallel these ands. It's not or, right? Just because migration is a thing that happened, it's as old as the beginning of all time. Nomads and people traveling in the Bible, when Abraham went from one location, the Lord said, go somewhere else. So that whole, just because you want to migrate for a better life for yourself or for what you envision for yourself, doesn't mean you have to dismantle and be ashamed. The
Mm.
problem is we are made to feel ashamed
Mm.
of who we are. It is difficult to assume our shared humanity.
Mm.
Like talk about for a long time in the Americas, Haitians have been ashamed, and I never understood why. My parents did a very important did a good job at instilling pride in us. But I understand now that I'm older
Mm.
why we are and we feel ashamed of our history. Even in the United States, the images of Haitians as being only related to voodoo and darkness
Mm.
and poverty, and those are the single stories of Haitians. And it's like, unless you have met with a Haitian, plays, yes, absolutely. Oh, yes. And I want to also say this. We're going to talk about how Christianity, white Christianity, played a role in
Yeah.
dismantling our visions of ourselves. And I am a Christian. And I have to say that when we looked at how those messages were passed down to us, and when we're looking at systematic racism in the white church, they went to bed. Racism went to bed with Christianity. And I think there's an unearthing of that. I think that God is upset with that. There's a dismantling that needs to be done. So we need to also say the role that Christianity, a religion that I have embraced and understood for my own, and know that God is a God of diversity. Know that a God of justice. Know that he created me and with my wide nose and my dark skin, and exactly that he didn't want me to change. Know that about myself and wants to relate to me through those experiences and to the world. But we have to accept that whole narrative that we need to go in all these parts of the world because they're barbaric and and war-torn and poor, and we need to spread the gospel, which I am all for spreading the gospel, but not at the expense of dehumanizing people.
Yeah.
Not at the expense of dehumanizing people and installing European and Western ideas. And so it's very complex. This whole idea of racism is very complex. It's in the school system, it's in the policing, it's in our religion, it's in the way we understood religion. When I realized that there was something called a slave Bible, and I said, what you mean it was a slave Bible? Yes, they tore chapters out of the book that had anything to do with freedom, equality, or messages that slaves could capture, right? And that was what you got to perpetuate. You perpetuated this idea that we ought to, listen to and obey and serve. And so it is all related.
Yeah.
And I think that there is an awakening with that relationship. And that's what we mean when we say systematic racism. Systematic. How is it passed down systematically?
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
This is not
Rachel.
enough. First of all, this is not enough. This conversation needs to continue however you continue it. I don't have all of the answers.
Yes.
But I do want you to open. We are open. It is time for us to get more expansive and demand. We're demanding systematic change in the United States. We ask our African brothers and sisters all over the world and members of the African diaspora to help and support. And it is a global thing. Everyone's saying around the world. Listen, it is catching around the world. We are asking for your support as we champion on our shoulders this idea of dismantling systematic racism in the United States and in Americas and around the world.
All right. Yes, true. And I think, like we said, we also need your support as African Americans or as Africans who are in the diaspora dealing with our own issues in Africa, because you also need to come to a home that is clean. I mean, even the Bible says that, cleanliness is next to godliness, and you don't want to come to a house that's dirty, So maybe it's reciprocal at the end of the day. Let's work together to make sure that we are all in a place where not only the color of our skin, but our continent, our intellect, that which makes us our education is upheld. So thank you so much, Rachel, for coming through. This is 59 minutes, and pretty soon IG will be cutting us off. And I want to continue this conversation with you. So we'll talk about it and come up with another episode where we can continue this conversation and further debunk the issues that we raised.
Thank you, Ritah. Excellent. Thank you for your work. Thank you, Lakedra, for even suggesting me. I see that you're on.
Yeah.
Good job, and keep it going. Keep it going. We need to connect with each other.
Definitely. All right. So thank you, everybody, for coming through We've got 20 seconds to go, and I love you all. Thank you so much for participating in the comment section. And look out for our IGTV. We're going to upload it on our IGTV, and you can always recap and, study what we were saying. And we'll also update you when we have the recording ready, and I'll share it with all of you. So,
peace, love, and light to you.